Every single month, this one number drops, and it can move markets, change policy, and pretty much take over the headlines. That number? The inflation rate. But have you ever stopped to wonder, where does that number actually come from? And maybe more importantly, does it have anything to do with the prices you are paying every day?
I mean, really think about it. You hear on the news that inflation is, I don't know, say 3%. But then you look at your grocery bill, and it feels like it's gone up 10%. There's this huge gap, right? Well, you are not imagining things. It turns out there's this long-running debate about whether the official numbers are really telling us the whole story.
And this isn't some new thing. For decades, literally decades, even economists at the Federal Reserve have admitted that the way we measure inflation has some serious flaws. So to really get why you might feel that disconnect between the news and your bank account, we need to pull back the curtain and see how these numbers are actually put together. Let's get into it.
All right, so whenever you hear someone on TV talking about inflation, 9 times out of 10, they're talking about one thing, the Consumer Price Index. You've heard of it, the CPI.
For over a century now, the CPI has been the main event, the go-to metric. It's put together by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and its whole job is to measure the average change in prices for a specific basket of stuff that people in cities buy. But that whole specific basket idea, yeah, that's where the problems really start.
So the CPI's whole approach has some pretty famous issues, and almost all of them come from this idea of a fixed basket of goods.
Okay, the fancy technical term for the CPI's method is a loss bears index. It sounds super complicated, but all it really means is that it figures out how much it costs to buy a bundle of stuff from the past at today's prices. It's designed to look backwards.
This analogy just nails the problem perfectly. Imagine you go to the grocery store today, but you're using a shopping list you wrote like 2 years ago. That list has no idea that steak prices went through the roof, so you've switched to chicken, or that you found this awesome new brand of coffee that's way cheaper. In a way, the CPI is kind of stuck shopping with that old, outdated list.
So to just break it down one more time, the CPI's last bearers index is all about a past shopping cart at today's prices. The alternative, a Pache index, does the total opposite. It measures today's shopping cart at past prices. Now, both have their own issues, but the way the CPI does it leads to some very specific and pretty major problems.
This leads to a few big ones. First, you've got substitution bias. That's the CPI completely missing the fact that you smartly switched from expensive beef to cheaper chicken. Second, it really struggles with quality. I mean, is a new iPhone that costs more actually more expensive if it's twice as fast and the camera is way better? The CPI has a really hard time figuring that out. And finally, its basket is just updated way too slowly to keep up with how fast our economy changes. All of this basically means the CPI tends to make the cost of living look higher than it actually is.
Okay, so because of all these issues, the Federal Reserve, the institution that's actually in charge of fighting inflation, they prefer to use a completely different number, one that tries to fix some of the CPI's biggest weaknesses.
And that's the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, or PCE. It's a totally different approach. Instead of asking households like yours what you buy, the PCE looks at surveys from businesses to see what they sell. It's also way broader. It includes costs that are paid for you, like health insurance from your job. But here's the real game changer. Its basket is dynamic. It updates every month, not just once a year, so it's much better at keeping up with our changing habits.
This different method has a huge effect on the final number. Just look at housing. It's a whopping 34% of the CPI, but only 16% of the PCE. And that's because the PCE's wider scope includes things like medical care that your insurance pays for. So healthcare gets a bigger slice of the pie, which then shrinks the slice for everything else, including housing. For the Fed, this gives a much fuller picture of what's happening with prices across the entire economy.
And the result of all this? Well, historically, the PCE almost always reports a lower inflation rate than the CPI. That dynamic weighting, the part that actually sees us switching to cheaper stuff, tends to shave a little bit off that final number. But, even the PCE isn't perfect. It gets revised, which makes it kind of a moving target. So, what if technology could give us an even better way?
So in the last few years, a totally new player has entered the game, one that uses modern technology to try and solve these problems that have been around forever. Meet Truflation, and the first thing you notice is just the insane scale of its data. The CPI looks at about 80,000 items. Truflation, it pulls price information from over 18 million items, and it does it every single day.
The other huge difference is how it builds trust. It's built on the blockchain. Now, all that really means is that its data and how it calculates everything is totally open for anyone to look at, and it can't be secretly changed later. The whole point is to create an inflation number that's completely transparent and verifiable.
So how does it actually work? Well, it's this constant four-step loop. First, it scrapes a massive amount of real-time price data. Second, it figures out what people are actually spending their money on to assign the right weights. Third, it calculates a brand new index every 24 hours. And fourth, it publishes that data for the whole world to see. It's a completely different way of thinking compared to the slow, monthly, survey-based government models.
So we've got the CPI, which is familiar but flawed. We've got the PCE, which is more complete but gets revised. And we've got Truflation, which is real-time but still pretty new. So, which one is the right one?
Well, the honest answer is that they all have trade-offs. The great thing about the CPI is its stability. That number doesn't get changed later, which is super important for things like Social Security payments. But yeah, it's slow, and it probably overstates inflation. The PCE is more accurate and dynamic, but the fact that it gets revised makes it a little tricky to use in the moment. And Truflation gives us incredible speed and data, but it just doesn't have the decades of history that economists really rely on.
And all this kind of brings us to a bigger idea. Maybe the search for one single, true number is missing the point. Because when it comes to something like inflation, what people believe is happening can be every bit as powerful as the number itself.
This chart of Google searches for the word inflation just says it all. Even after the biggest price spikes were over, public concern is still sitting at roughly double what it was before the pandemic. The official numbers might be coming down, but that feeling of inflation, that anxiety, it is still very much with us.
And this gets to exactly what researchers at the Brookings Institution are talking about. It's not just about providing information, it's about reducing the perception of bias. If people don't trust the number, its value just plummets, no matter how perfectly it was calculated.
And that leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. In an economy that's basically run on what we all expect to happen next, public trust is everything. So if there's this growing chasm between the official stats and what people feel in their own lives, does the hunt for a technically perfect, true inflation rate even matter if nobody believes it anyway?